Welcome to the Prosperident Exchange, where ideas are exchanged, experiences are shared, and dental professionals come together to learn from the people shaping our industry. Through real stories, expert insight, and practical conversations, we're helping practices become stronger, smarter, and more secure. Here are your hosts, Courtney Steiger and Amber Weber-Gonzalez.
Amber Weber-Gonzalez here. We're excited for our About Us podcast because we want the world to know how exciting our company, Prosperident, is. I'm Amber Weber-Gonzalez. I'm the Supervising Proactive Services Advisor with Prosperident. I am here with my fellow colleague, Courtney Steiger. She is a Senior Fraud Examiner with Prosperident, and we both have the honor to work together with this wonderful company working on embezzlement and theft prevention. We are excited to kick off this podcast with the founder of Prosperident, David Harris. And the goal of this is, David, we all are excited to come work with you, but we want to know more about your story, how Prosperident started, and just the history of this long-standing company and how you've seen things change and grow.
Sounds like a great topic, Amber. And hi, Courtney. Good to be with you both. I would like to tell you, Amber, that I had some master plan and some vision that being in the dental embezzlement space was just the natural place to be. That is not how it happened. I'll make this short, but unlike probably most of the audience, I had an early and unplanned exit from high school. I ended up joining the Army mostly because it kept me out of prison. And I spent 12 awesome years in the Army. I really made the most of myself, got an education, learned a lot of things. And eventually when it was time to leave, I grew my hair long like it is now and entered the civilian workforce. And I had done some investigation. So there was a bank that had an investigator position available and I took it. About 2 years later, I was seriously frustrated. And the bank that I worked for was just so stupid. If people had any idea how dumb the folks holding their money were, they'd probably won it all back. And one day I just got so frustrated, I quit and I moved back to my hometown and I'd been here for about 2 weeks and I was starting to climb the walls. This was, to give you the chronology, this was 1989, before the internet, before Netflix, before PVRs. And it was easy to get bored in those days. And after about 2 weeks of not working, that was me. So my phone rang one day and it was a guy I had been in high school with in my short stay there. And I made it about 2 weeks into my sophomore year. And he was now a dentist. And he called me and he said, David, I think my front desk person is stealing from me and I have no one else to call about this. So he caught me at the right moment. I was really looking for a diversion. So I said to my friend, okay, no problem. Why don't I come by your practice tonight after you close and we'll dig into your books. So I went over that night to his office. Now this was 1989 BC. In other words, before computers. So practices used to use that old system called pegboard. And in pegboard, each patient had this thing called a ledger card that showed how much money they owed the practice. And they used to keep all these cards in a tray at the front desk. So I got to the guy's office and he basically shoved this tray of ledger cards at me. And he said, I think it's in there somewhere.
Okay.
And I said, okay, but we're going to do this a little bit differently. Can you please show me where she works? So my friend took me over to the suspect's desk. And what I did was started going through the drawers in her desk. And now my friend was going bug-eyed. Are you going to get me in some trouble here? Aren't we invading her privacy? And I reassured him a little bit. And I said, no, you're fine. It's not actually her desk. It's your desk. She just works there. And then what I found taped under one of her drawers was what you guys all know as the cheat book. And for the audience's benefit, thieves normally have to keep track of what they've done so that they don't end up sending an invoice to somebody who's actually paid, but the payment didn't get recorded in practice management's office. So thieves typically need to document what's real and what's not real in the patient accounts. And in 2023, that cheat book is more likely to be an Excel spreadsheet. But in 1989, it was a notebook. So I found the notebook. And
Lucky break.
From there, the whole thing unraveled pretty quickly. 2 hours later, we had a pretty good picture of what it had. She'd taken about $35,000, which was pretty big dollars in 1989.
Yeah.
So my friend was not happy that he'd been stolen from, but he appreciated my help. And he hit me up for one more favor. He said, "Can you come back in the morning? Because I want to fire her, but I'd rather not do it on my own." Okay. I'm expecting to be bored tomorrow too. So of course I'll come. So I came back the next morning. We fired her. Took all of about 8 minutes. She, I think, was expecting it. And my friend promised to buy me dinner. That never happened. And I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and walked away. And I thought, well, that was kind of interesting, but I didn't really see a career for myself. 2 weeks later, I got hit by lightning. And what I mean by that is I had an appointment at my dentist's office, my own dentist, and I had my hand on the door handle and I was about to go inside. And I looked through the glass panel on the door, in the door, and sitting at my dentist's front desk was the same woman that I helped fire 2 weeks ago. I will not repeat what I said next because I wouldn't say it in polite company. So I turned tail really quickly, hoping she didn't see me. I ran to the nearest payphone, which was about 300 yards away. And I got there and I called the dental office. I didn't know a whole lot about how dental practices worked then. The one piece of knowledge I had was I knew the name of an orthodontist in my city. So when I called, I just gave his name as my name, and because I had to get past the gatekeeper. So
Yeah.
I just gave his name as my name, and then I got put right through to the dentist. And the dentist picked up. And what I said to him next was, "It's not Dr. Jensen, it's David Harris. I'm supposed to be in your chair right now, but let me explain why I'm not." And I told him what was sitting at his front desk and what I knew about her. And my dentist panicked and hired me. And that was my first client. And while I was working for him, the local Henry Schein guy, I realized what I was doing. And he had a couple of other dentists that he was concerned about. So I got introduced to them and suddenly I was in business. So that was the start. There was no plan. And I didn't even have a name or anything. But all of a sudden I was doing investigations in dental practices and it just kind of grew from there.
Like, that's wild to me. What are the odds? Yeah. Okay, Ellen, where you were at, was this a small town or is this a larger metropolitan area?
The population now is about 500,000, Courtney. Back then it
Okay.
was probably about half that, but big,
So
big enough.
big enough. What are the odds that the same person that you had just caught stealing are in another one? That's wild.
As they say, God takes care of fools and drunks. And I'm not really a drunk, but I think I might have fallen into the fool category. And yeah, somebody was looking out for me. But it was really that coincidence that launched this activity and ultimately Prosperident and you guys.
I'm curious, and I don't know if you are, Amber, but what did your early cases look like? Because, like you said, you just kind of stumbled into this. Obviously, you had experience with the bank, and there are some similarities in industries and schemes, but I can't imagine that they were so similar that it didn't take some finessing on those early cases to kind of see the patterns or to see what was going on.
There was definitely a bit of a learning curve, but most of it was kind of more cultural than
Okay.
anything else. Pegboard was very simple.
Yeah.
And when we compare what happens now in computerized practice management software with the way people used to steal in pegboard, it was very rudimentary. And what I always had, Courtney, was the ability to think like a criminal.
Yeah.
And when in case the audience is wondering, yeah, what got me kicked out of high school was some bad stuff. So I'd had a little practice, but the thinking like a crook part always came naturally. And I could always stand in that receptionist or office manager's shoes and say, if this is my environment, this is how I would steal. So that part came easily to me and it didn't come naturally to most dentists. So they were looking at me like, okay, this guy's got some kind of knowledge that I just probably would never have. So that part wasn't hard. The more challenging part was fitting in culturally, understanding kind of what a dentist's life is like, what pressures they're under, how they would react emotionally to this. That's what took a while to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've seen that change, right? So that's my big question for you is how have you seen things change over the last several decades since this started versus now?
Let's start with the technological. you did investigations in the pegboard days, you had to be on site, first of all. There was no concept whatsoever of a remote investigation. So the way investigations used to work in like 1989 or 1990 was I'd meet the dentist after they closed the practice. They would hand me a key and say, okay, and you have to be gone at 6 a.m. because the staff start coming in around 7, and I just don't want somebody to come in early and catch you. So they were all on site. They were typically all-nighters. You'd work at night because that's when you could. We used to have to do things like, I used to carry a Polaroid camera. Right? If the audience doesn't remember Polaroids, they spit out an actual picture. So the protocol would be when you started work, you're going to sit at somebody's desk. And the first thing you do is you take a Polaroid of the desk so that when you leave at 6 a.m, you can put everything back where it was.
Did you measure the distance between each thing before you?
No, the Merc 1 eyeball. Or if you were going to look through drawers and stuff like that, there was, again, a lot more of that because the notes and stuff were on paper. Same thing. You'd open the drawer, you'd take a Polaroid photo of the drawer, and then when you were done, everything got restored. So that was one of the protocols. Or if you were looking through that tray of ledger cards, you had to make sure that at the end they were in the same order as at the beginning. So if they were alphabetized, you had to alphabetize them again. So yeah, there was all that kind of stuff. So it was a very different working environment. In terms of what changed, the thing that really revolutionized what we do is the ability to do investigations remotely. And for the audience's benefit, both of our hosts live in Texas. And every day they're investigating all kinds of weird places a long way from them. And that just was not feasible 25 years ago. So that's changed. Of course, back when I started, it was just me. We now have about 20 people, and that's changed. And that's one of the things I like the most, because in case anybody in the audience hasn't gotten the vibe from the three of us, I really love the people I work with.
I have a question for you, Dave. In the early days, as you mentioned, you have the ability to think like a criminal. And when you walked into some of these offices, did you ever immediately, before you took that first Polaroid, did you ever just have that gut feeling that there absolutely was an embezzler in that practice?
For sure. Although I'm not sure it's really a gut feeling as much as listening to the dentist, because before I ever stepped into an office, I've talked to the dentist. We've interviewed each other. I understand what's prompting them to reach out to us. There's always that intuition, and Courtney, nothing there has changed. We still do exactly the same thing now. When a dentist calls us initially, I'm trying to take the temperature and seeing how likely it is that somebody's stealing from them. And yeah, I'm probably right about that more times than I'm not.
Oh, interesting.
That's interesting. Obviously, Prosperident has changed, as you said, across the decade. And Amber and I have the luxury of having an audit trail. And as you mentioned, you did not. On the same point lens, I've had a case having the cheat book in hand, but we've seen other types of cheat books, as you mentioned. Do you feel like the change from 1989 to 2026, technology has changed the gap between the dental industry and law enforcement? Do you think it's about the same, just different challenges like between the two? Because yes, you're looking at the same thing, but you're not, because there's added challenges with technologies, but there was also challenges in not having technologies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good question. Technology is definitely the thief's friend. And it's a lot easier to steal, and you can steal a lot more money today than you ever could in 1989. The thefts we see now, and Amber had a case not that long ago where the number is about $750,000. Courtney, you had one that was really close to $1 million recently. Those, even if you backed out inflation, those kind of numbers were inconceivable in 1989. So technology is a huge enabler. And I'll mention a name that you're both familiar with probably, but the audience might not be. And that's Frank Abagnale. So Frank was the subject of the book and the movie Catch Me If You Can. And just for the audience's benefit, that's actually mandatory reading for Prosperident fraud investigators. One of the first things we do when we hire somebody is we put them with that book, because it gives really good insight into how criminals think. So Frank Abagnale was a thief. He was largely check thief. In other words, he would cash forged checks. And I've had some email exchanges with him. He's one of my personal heroes. And the reason is once he got caught and sent to prison, he turned his life for good. And he spent the majority of his adult life helping organizations improve their security and their resistance to fraud. And when I was in trouble and thinking about turning my life around, I happened to be reading his book. And it just gave me hope that not everybody who's a criminal is going to stay that way forever. So he's definitely a hero of mine. And we've had several email exchanges over the years. And one of the things he said that always stuck with me is, you know what? If I was doing it all again, I could steal way more money today than I could have back then because of technology.
That's so interesting, especially considering we hear all the time to talk about AI and AI is going to prevent these things and being able to do that. I don't know how you feel. I don't know that's full-heartedly the truth in that. As you said, that there's something to that gut feeling and that interaction when you just know that this is not how that should act. And I don't know that AI is still going to have that ability.
AI is a double-edged sword, and in the sense, Courtney, that it can work for both parties. I went to ChatGPT a little while ago, and I just asked it a question. The first question I asked it is, how should I steal from a dental practice? And AI's got some rails around it. So it said, sorry, but I'm not going to answer that question. And I said, okay, fine. What are the 5 most common ways that embezzlers steal from dental practices? And it answered that question, and it spit out a pretty detailed blueprint on how to do it. So yes, AI certainly has the potential to help protect practices against embezzlement. It also has the potential to help thieves. I was listening to something on CNN this morning, and they were talking about AI in terms of hacking. And one of the big concerns now is that hackers are using AI tools to try to find a way to hack into computer networks and things like that. And it's a real concern. In fact, the head of Anthropic, which is the company behind Claude, one of the popular AI platforms, was proposing that we just put a freeze on developing large language models because of the concern with making the tools available to hackers. So we have to consider
that
AI to be a bilateral tool and not one that's necessarily going to help people stop embezzlement.
Yeah, exactly what you need. A team of experts to make sure, is AI your friend or is it hurting you in your practice? Is technology your friend? There's a lot of cases that Courtney and I have seen where the doctors think my software is set up perfect, everything is good, nobody could hide this from me. And it's actually wasn't that difficult. So I love that point where it's a double-edged sword and doesn't mean if you have the latest and the greatest that you're 100% foolproof.
Very true.
Which brings me to an interesting question. So number one, obviously, did you ever think that dentistry would need something this big, right? And then what was your biggest, craziest case that you ever had or you've ever seen in the last 30 years?
Yeah, I guess I realized pretty early on, Amber, how big this problem was. And just in case the audience hasn't seen the statistic, roughly 70% of dentists will be embezzlement victims at some point in their careers. So put another way, the majority of dentists will be stolen from by employees. So I realized early on that this was a significant issue. And I'm sorry, I totally forgot your second question. Could you give me that one back?
What's been like the craziest thing?
The craziest things are always situations. We just wrapped up an investigation where the dentist was investigating their mother, who was the office manager. We have lots and lots of cases where we have partners in a dental practice who are stealing from each other.
I was going to ask, have you ever had one who thought the other one was stealing more than the other?
Yes. I've told this story before and it still just strikes me as funny. I got a call one day from a guy who said, I'm an orthodontist, and he gave his state. And he said, I practice with another orthodontist, and we have this unwritten rule between us that when patients pay in cash, we just put it in our pockets and we don't tell the IRS about it. I'm thinking about that. Where's this going? Yeah. But it was the next thing he said, Courtney, that kind of rocked me back when he said, and the reason I'm calling you, David, is that I think my partner is stealing more than I am. Really didn't know what to say next. And anyway, we ended up investigating. It was your colleague, Wendy Askins, who did the investigation. And her conclusion was that he was right. And the differential was about $300,000. So it wasn't exactly chicken feed. And it was a very artistically written report because we had to dance around the elephant in the room called tax evasion. But yeah, that was an interesting call.
I can only imagine. I can't. Was this done over Zoom? Did you keep a straight face over Zoom? And they were like, I think my partner and I are not stealing equally. I don't know that I could have kept it together.
Yeah. Thankfully, it was long enough ago that we weren't routinely doing that initial contact by Zoom. So it was a phone call, and I'm sure that the expression on my face wasn't visible, but these folks are orthodontists. They're used to hearing people talk with their mouths in weird positions. So I'm sure at the other end, the orthodontist detected some level of shock.
So, Dave, I love your story because you've done this for so long. But when did you realize the need that you couldn't just do this 100% on yourself, and the need for Prosperident to grow and expand to just the dental industry?
Yeah, we've always been dental only. That was the case from day one. My first employee came on in about 1997. Until that point, it was just me, and then brought on one person, and then we quickly grew to 3 and then 5. And by 2010, I think we had 6 people. And of course, we've grown a fair bit since then as well. But again, I always knew the market was pretty big. When we were doing this on site, that's a huge limiting factor because geography becomes your limitation. And most of the investigations I did on site were relatively local, within maybe a 3-hour drive of me. And it was really once practice is computerized, and then once those dental practice management software computers got hooked to the internet, that's really when the growth opportunity was there. And that just unshackled us from geography.
First, that's crazy to me that there were that many practices within that close of a vicinity to you to obviously continue to sustain the need for Prosperident. And then once we became, like you said, unchanged from the shackles of geography, what then set Prosperident apart, in your opinion, from other firms that investigate fraud and embezzlement?
That's a good question. One obvious answer, Courtney, is the people. And we have always had a very definite hiring pattern. We take people who have dental experience and we help them learn how to be investigators. So everybody who works here, and I can speak to both of your backgrounds because you both started as working in the clinical part of dentistry and then moved from there to the management part, and then from there to Prosperident. And that's a really typical profile for us. We have a lot of people who used to be dentists or hygienists or dental assistants working here. And that's one of the things that sets us aside. I have found over the years that people with an accounting or a law enforcement background don't do well at this. The first issue is that they don't really understand the culture of dentistry.
No.
And the second thing is that they just don't have the background knowledge that they need. We end up dealing with stuff like adjustments to practice management software. And when I talk about dual insurance and coordination of benefits, you two know exactly what I mean. That's a horrendously complex topic. I was trying to explain it to a dentist the other day, and I said, if you have dual insurance and you're in network with one and you're out of the network with the other, then it depends who's the primary and who's the secondary. And you could spend half an hour trying to explain that to somebody who already understood dentistry. God help you trying to explain that to somebody in law enforcement, for example. So we had the realization very early on that we should hire from dentistry, and we've always kept true to that. And that's worked out well. We early on decided that this needs to be a systematic process. The first investigations I did were a black art. Like there were no rules. You figured out how to do it as you went. You carried that knowledge from one engagement to the next, but none of it was on paper. It was all just in your head. And we decided that wasn't a reasonable way to run a company. So we started early on building systems, investing in software to make things easier or more predictable. And we have a policy manual that's about 200 pages. And both of you will remember that when you joined Prosperident, we handed you a copy of that manual and said, here, have a good weekend.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. But
Exactly what happened.
there's a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge in there. And in terms of helping you get a running start as an investigator, that was a pretty good tool. And it all came because we've always said, this can't be a country club here. We have to treat Prosperident like a business, and we need the infrastructure and the people to make that happen. So that's one of the things we've always done to differentiate ourselves.
I love that. And because both of us come from a dental background, and I think that's what's a great quality is when we all communicate, we all understand each other's language. What's interesting though, is just because you have dental experience doesn't mean you can just step into this and do this job. And I'll never forget the tests I had to take to make sure I could think like a criminal and step up to the plate. It was worse than taking the dental hygiene boards. I was so stressed out. Tell that story. And then also some interesting stories, maybe how you've hired some people through interacting with, hey, you seem like you might know or have the foundation to do this job, but how about you come spend some time with us and we could teach you more. So I'd love what do you go through? You just can't be just a dental person to do this job.
Very true. And you said something that I've said often. Good investigators can get inside the head of a criminal. If you can't do that, if you don't have insight into how criminals think, then in our world, you're a plotter. And what I mean by that is somebody gives you a checklist of here are the things you look at, and you follow the checklist, and hopefully if embezzlement is happening, you find it. But the good investigators will sit there and hypothesize. Here's how this practice functions. Here's where the opportunities to steal are for this person. So let me look there first. And I don't want to suggest that we don't follow a fairly rigid protocol with investigations. We absolutely do. But as I say, good investigators will catch a scent of what might be going on and go there first. And you both had the privilege. You both had the privilege of training under Scott Clifford, who's a legend here at Prosperident. And Scott is just amazing at that. He can almost feel where the theft is going to be. And usually he'll go right at it and find it. And that's a skill we want from everybody. So that's a big part of it. Being able to put yourself in the shoes of a criminal. And that test that made Amber so nervous was where we were assessing that skill with her. But some people have described me, Amber, as a collector of people. And I'll meet people in weird circumstances and maybe see the potential for them to fit in here and end up hiring them. And since I've been naming names all day, I'll give a great example. Alyssa Kimmons, who's one of our senior fraud examiners. Alyssa started as a dental hygienist. She moved into a management role. She had started a business of her own where she was going to help dentists clean up messy books in their practice management software and things like that. And she was doing a little bit of embezzlement investigation as well. And we locked horns on a Facebook group when she was talking about embezzlement. And I said to her, I hope you'll understand if I don't feel good about a total amateur walking in the shoes of a professional. And Alyssa got a little huffy and came back to me and said, ouch, that hurt a bit. Anyway, we had a little more dialogue and I saw something in her I really liked. And I said, if you want to do this investigation thing, why don't you do it the right way and apply for work here?
Yeah.
And she did. And man, was I ever glad we had that fight on Facebook. She's been an absolute rock star here. As we have this conversation, she's in New York City about to do, we do very little on-site work, but she's got some coming up this afternoon for a really interesting case. And yeah, that's how she came to pass. Amber, in your case, I had heard about you from several people saying you really need to talk to this Amber Weber gal. And then we ran into each other at a conference and it all started from there. And that was like 8 years ago. And there's no turning back from that one.
Yeah.
We're with each other forever. Courtney, I can't even remember how you and I got connected, but
I actually stumbled upon you. I had just left where I was at. And much like you, I had no plans on what I was going to do. And I stumbled upon you. And I remember reading your post, and you're very specific about make sure you follow direction. And I think you had made a comment to the post about, wow, so many of you don't know how to follow directions. And I got a really good chuckle out of it. And I thought, not. Let me throw my hat into the ring. How difficult can these directions be that he is saying you guys can't follow directions? That was how I came to be. So I was like you, a soul who had left where I was at and was like, all right, let's go follow some directions and see where this leads.
yeah. And of course, we really want independent thinkers here, but with a little bit of structure around them. So yeah, absolutely. Anyway, a lot of us have stories like that as to how we got here. Scott Clifford, who I mentioned a few minutes ago, is another person who had an interesting story. He was thinking about, Scott had worked in dental practices, and he had done an investigation in his father's office who he worked for, and was thinking about making a career, and emailed me about setting up a business. And I said, if you want to, you can do that. Or alternatively, we're hiring right now. Would you like to talk to us instead? And that was like 12 years ago or 14 years ago. I've lost track. And again, just an absolute rock star in our world.
I think what's interesting is we're talking about our team of examiners and how it's grown and everything. And one thing I think that's really helped me in my 8 years of working with the company is it takes time to do the work that we do, which I think with technology, and we talked about AI earlier, that a lot of people out in just the regular world think that, oh, this is easy to do. You should be able to do this in 2 or 3 days. But because like you said, Dave, there's so many different ways we have to look at stuff and think like a thief and look at unknown areas that a lot of people wouldn't. But I think without our team of people, there's times I'll reach out to Courtney or Scott and say, okay, here's what I've come across. Give me your input. And I think that's another thing that makes our team and Prosperident so unique is we will come together, and our thieves who aren't thieves yet because we think that way will go, here, did you look here? And so I think helping the public understand there is a timeline, and it does take a strategic amount of time because we want to make sure if I need help, I have another person who can make sure I didn't not miss something, but we're being as thorough as we can when we're looking at the financial aspect of a practice.
I'm so with you. That was almost exactly where I was going. As Dave had mentioned, how we think about things. I can't tell you how many countless nights I have literally worked through my case and I'm looking at it and I am playing in my head how this could actually occur in an office. I'm picturing the office. I'm picturing the person. I'm picturing how their practice runs. And you and I have had many late night conversations about, am I thinking about this wrong? If you were to be here, would you think to see this? And I think I know I've had imposter syndrome where I've looked at this like, I'm certainly not smart enough to do that. Obviously, Dave would not hire people that are not smart enough to do this. But my point being is sometimes you need that extra person to be like, no, you really are this smart. You really can figure this out. And I don't know that other firms have what we have to come together and be like, nope, you are right where you need to be and you are on the right track.
Yeah. Yeah.
In case anybody's wondering, Courtney is spooky smart.
Yeah.
Let's not at all downplay that intellect. To me, AI is like a power tool in the sense that it can take a good investigator and make them better and quicker at their job. It doesn't substitute for that investigator. I was thinking the other day, when I was a kid, when they were building houses in my neighborhood, and back in those days, there weren't power tools. So when somebody sawed a board, they had a handsaw and they did this. And when they pounded a nail and they took a hammer and they did this. So now there are really good power tools in construction. And what used to take 3 minutes to saw that board now probably takes 20 seconds. And instead of being able to pound 300 nails a day, somebody with a nail gun can put in 1,000. Neither of those things has replaced the carpenter. They just made them quicker and probably in a lot of cases better at what they do. But somebody still has to decide which tool they need to use right now to solve the problem. So we're implementing our own homegrown AI here. It's called Apex today. In fact, the head of the project is in the office today working on it. But
Right.
that's never going to replace our investigators. It's just going to make them better and more productive.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Even with timelines, there's times I've had cases go on for months and months because there's one little missing piece that isn't 100% in the software. And so I think that's important for everybody to know. I think in every industry that happens. Now, like Courtney and I said, we've spent late nights talking to each other. Aside from you staying up all night because you used to go on site and have to do this in the dark, what are some areas and stories you'd like to share that, wow, I've got a sleepless night over this case or this scenario?
And I'm just picturing, Dave, by the way, you there
know.
with your flashlight in the
I
dark.
know, right?
Yeah.
No, we didn't use flashlights. We used headlamps
Okay.
Oh,
because you need
okay.
both hands free, Courtney.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, it was the headlamp.
Yeah, I like it.
What keeps me up at night? Cases don't. I've been at this long enough that I think I can solve any case problem that somebody throws at me. But the things that keep me up at night are a lot of our investigations are covert. And what I mean by covert is that we are doing investigations when the person who is the suspect is still working in the practice and doesn't know that the investigation is going on. And keeping things covert requires a lot of things. Back in the day when we did the all-nighters, it was the Polaroid camera and taking the picture so that you could put everything back the next morning. Now that we're working on computerized practice management software and we're doing it at a distance, we have to be careful not to make a little mistake that would blow our cover. There was one case, and we're going back 8 or 10 years, and one of our examiners was working remotely, and they wanted to print a report. Courtney knows where this is going suddenly. And by mistake, that report got sent to the printer in the practice as opposed to the examiner's printer in their office. Fortunately, it happened on a Friday night. And the examiner sheepishly called the dentist and said, I kind of need you to drop what you're doing right now and go down to the practice and retrieve a report that I sent to your printer by mistake. So we have some safeguards to protect against that. And I can't remember the last time that a suspect actually realized we were on the job. Okay.
Courtney. It was Courtney. I know the story.
It was me.
Oh, yeah. I had forgotten that until I saw the look on Courtney's face. But that's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. The possibility that maybe our covert operation isn't actually covert and that we end up communicating something to a dentist staff that shouldn't have happened.
Okay.
Yeah, mine, and to be clear, when I had mine, I did not print anything to the printer, and it actually prompted a policy change. Our suspect actually had the password for our doctor's email address, which is how I was found out. So I was not, we were actually very careful, and Dave has a lot of rules in place in terms of things as far as being covert, but ours prompted the policy change with our practice owners that when they do engage our services to go and change that, because I was communicating as we normally do through a personal email address of the doctor, but our suspect had the password for that email, unfortunately, or their phone or a way to get into it for that. So unfortunately, it was me. I am sorry to have broken that streak.
Yeah, we're well on the way to a new one. And the good thing about something like that is when stuff goes wrong in our world, inevitably that prompts us to step back and look at what broke and make a change. And yeah, we have a protocol now where just about the first thing the doctor does when they start working with us is have a secure email. In fact, what we encourage a lot of dentists to do is just go set up a new Hotmail or Gmail account. They're free anyway, and we'll communicate with you through that. And then there's just absolutely no chance of something happening like what happened in Courtney's case. I don't think there was any particular harm done there. I think it just was a case where
we let her go sooner than we were expecting. Yeah. So yes, she was going to be let go anyway. When she found out, it unfortunately created a very uncomfortable situation in the office. And so we had to let her go a little faster than was anticipated before we had finished the investigation for that. That was all that really happened on that one. thankfully, nothing too terribly crazy as far as that goes. But yeah. Dave, I do need to know though, do you have a photograph of you wearing your headlamp during your investigations?
No, I don't. I never turned that Polaroid around and pointed it at us. So,
Dang it.
Dang it. We were watching
yeah.
that. That would have been good.
Do you
I'm
have
sorry.
any
Can't help you.
Polaroids from your, did you
What's
ever
that?
keep any of your did you keep any of the Polaroids at all from your cases? Do you have a stack of memorabilia from your
No,
cases?
I didn't. We used to just shred them.
Okay.
Interesting.
These were covert investigations. You don't really want Polaroids kicking around somewhere that show somebody's workspace. So no, the protocol was at the
Fair.
end of the investigation, you destroyed them. So I have kept exactly that.
Okay. We're really focusing on embezzlement and how you used to pull all-nighters, and we make sure everything is covert. As far as what's changed since you first started really focusing on embezzlement, how has Prosperident changed and grown through the years where we just don't want to find embezzlement from a preventative and a safeguarded measure? Can you share with the audience how that came about and how it's continuing to change and grow because of our friend and sometimes not friend technology?
That's a great question. And I really want to answer that. We've had people coming to us for years and saying, you guys know how people steal. You get to see firsthand the breakdown in controls or the breakdowns in controls that let people steal. Can you help us prevent this problem? Like, why are you limited to being the fire department and waiting until the house is on fire and then coming and putting it out? And pretty much, Amber, from the day I started, that was a request of people. And for the longest time, we just pushed back and said, no, we're an investigation. And what we do is we investigate, and preventing this, yeah, we probably could do it, but that just isn't what we see as our mandate. And we said that for the longest time. And then around 10 years ago, we had a marketing director who sat me down one day and said, I think you want to help dentists, but I think that you're missing the best way to do it. And when she said that, she got my attention, and I said, how? She said, you have the tools. You absolutely know how to protect dentists against embezzlement. Why don't you just do it? And she pushed me, and in her nice way, she was very firm about things. The only reason I wrote my first book was because she came to me one day and gave me a 3-month deadline and said, I want your manuscript by that date. So she also pushed on the proactive work, and I listened to her, and the way she put it made sense. And her comment was, we should be doing more of that than investigation. So we built a product and we refined it, and it really took on a life of its own when Amber became the brand manager here. The product is called Ops, or Owner Proactive Strategies. And yeah, it involves lowering risk and helping dentists feel like they're in control of their finances. We get so many people who come here and they say, I'm really good at dentistry, but what causes me to lose sleep is the possibility that people are stealing from me. And the strongest internal control I have is called luck. And Amber and her team are just great at working with these folks and helping them build simple, time-efficient financial controls. One of the things that holds dentists back is, okay, so I hold a handpiece for 32 hours a week. I'm not eager to spend another 20 a week being my own accountant. And Amber shows them, no, this is maybe 10 minutes a day and probably a couple of hours at the end of the month.
Yeah.
So that's been one of our success stories. And yes, I love the idea that we have moved from fixing what's broken to also helping people lessen their risk and feel comfortable about their ability to manage their finances.
So Dave, you kind of mentioned that most practices, fraud preventions, are hoping that they have lady luck on their side. But I think it might be that they have a little too much trust. What area or people do you think practice owners put a little too much trust in that they need lady luck?
The way that we humans deal with trust, Courtney, is interesting. When we first meet somebody, we look at them and evaluate them and say, can I trust this person or not?
Yes.
And if the answer you come up with is yes, then it's like you lock it in this closet and never revisit that trust question with that person again. In other words, we have this binary concept of trust. Either I can trust this person or I can't.
No middle ground.
No middle ground, no periodic reevaluation. No saying, yeah, I know that I could trust them 5 years ago, but something has happened in between. And maybe I need to watch them a little more carefully now. That is just not human nature. And that's what gets people in trouble. So I don't think there's a person or a circumstance I can point to directly where I say you absolutely can or you absolutely cannot trust this person in this case. But I think that if there's a takeaway here for the audience, we can't lock it in a closet. We have to continuously be reevaluating that. And the other thing, and this came from one of our clients who I asked after he'd been embezzled, if you had any words of wisdom, if I was talking to a class of dental students, what would you want them to know from your experience? And what he said that has always stuck with me is, I learned to trust systems.
Fabulous advice.
Yeah, that was one of the wisest things that anybody ever said to me. The other wise thing that somebody said to me once came from Amber Weber Gonzalez. And what she said is that one of the first casualties of embezzlement is transparency.
She's so good.
And if you're a doctor and you're listening, what Amber's really telling you is when your staff are guarding things from you or doctor, you don't need to worry about that. You just go in that operatory and drill holes in enamel. When somebody's doing that to you, be careful.
Yeah. And so important why one of the things that Courtney recommends and myself and all of the other examiners is don't be afraid to go back and audit what happened, whether your software has an audit trail, you're running regular reports. I've had a lot of practice owners tell me, that's micromanaging. I don't want my team to see me as micromanaging their work. But you're right. The transparency, if there's transparency when a team member, they shouldn't care. They should be 100% on board with any type of retroactive look when you want to look back and, hey, can you show me that report?
And let me add something to what each of you just said, because there's a lot of gold there in your words. I'm going to add one more thing. When a lot of doctors do when they see something that's anomalous is they go and ask someone, explain to me why there's this big adjustment on this patient. And let's acknowledge the knowledge gap between the dentist and their staff when it comes to things like that. So if somebody's stealing from you and you ask for an explanation, they'll absolutely give you one. It will probably leave you a little confused. And at that point, you'll just go back in your operatory where you actually are in control. When something doesn't look right, what I always tell dentists to do is ask somebody, but ask them for the documentation. Go back to documents when things don't make sense. And that changes everything. So if you see that adjustment that looks big, rather than asking for an explanation, what I'd like you to do is ask for the EOB, the explanation of benefits, which is the piece of paper that the insurance company sends to the practice that says, here's what the adjustment should be. So if adjustments don't make sense, ask for the EOB. If your cash flow kind of sucks and you're not sure why, start by asking for the receivables list, as opposed to asking somebody, why don't I have money in my bank account? Well, we had that 1 week of the year that has 5 weekends instead of 4. So, we worked a little bit less time last month, and the insurance company slowed down their payments over the summer. So that's why our cash flow is good. No, I want to see the receivables report. And when I look at the receivables report, I want to break it between patient receivables and insurance receivables because they're all dollars, but those two are really different. And I also want to look at a receivables report where credit balances have been filtered out because credit balances mask receivable problems. So let's get that mindset of going back to paper.
I could not agree more. So I know we're closing in on quite a bit of time and we definitely appreciate it. We know how busy you are. I have one final question for you. And I think that has to do with, I know Dave's like, no, it's nothing crazy, I swear. What do you think the largest misconception of embezzlement, whether it's dentistry or embezzlement period, it could be dentistry, could be any industry. What do you feel is the largest misconception?
Can I give you two answers, Courtney?
Yes, of course.
I'm that kind of guy. The two biggest misconceptions I run into, the first one is if stealing is happening, my accountant would find it.
Yes.
And
I think we've all seen this.
yeah, I was speaking at a conference last weekend and somebody said that to me. My accountant is protecting me against embezzlement. No, they're not. And they're not protecting you for a whole bunch of reasons. First of all, accountants are not people in general who are good at thinking like criminals. And overall, for society, that's probably a good thing. The second thing is that they're not looking at what happens in your practice management software. That is just completely off their radar. And the third thing is they're not being mandated or paid by the dentist to do the extra steps necessary to look for embezzlement.
No.
So if you think that your accountant is the front line of your defense against embezzlement, you're really wrong on that. The second misconception is that the only thing that thieves can steal is cash. And 30 or 40 years ago, that was probably mostly true. It is not anymore. And we've talked a lot today about technology. One of the things that technology has done is open the door for thieves to steal things other than cash. It is so easy now to cash a check payable to somebody else. And 30 or 40 years ago, that probably wasn't true. It's easy to steal a credit card payment. Something that we're increasingly seeing is electronic funds transfers get redirected to a thief. We have a case going right now. It's actually not even embezzlement. It's a case where what happened is somebody bought a practice and for whatever reason, 3 insurance companies never got their electronic funds transfers redirected to the new owner. So for the last 4 years, the former owner of the practice is still getting paid for this. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably north of $500,000. Your colleague, Anne-Marie Carroll, one of our fraud examiners is
Yes.
the investigator on this case. And yeah, we haven't been able to prove intent yet, but there's been a whole bunch of money landing in the bank account of a former owner.
I just can't even imagine that former owner didn't realize he was getting paid for years. Thousands of dollars.
I never said the former owner didn't realize it. What I said was it wasn't intentional. Yeah, I have exactly the same question, but it points to the fact that again, with technology and with money moving around electronically, it's really easy to steal forms of payment other than cash. So that's a misconception I see a whole lot.
What about product?
Yeah, it happens too. And by product, what Courtney's talking about is, for example, if a practice is selling electric toothbrushes, some of them fall off the truck and they get stolen. Or something we see sometimes is a thief who's stealing stuff from the supply cabinet. So I steal rotary endo files because they're small and valuable and they can fit in my pocket. And then I sell them on eBay. And yes, that definitely happens too.
Yeah. So I think this really feeds into my final thing I really want to talk about. In my experience, because I did embezzlement before you, by luck, fell into a case and then met you, Dave.
You did embezzlement. Did you get
Well,
convicted?
no, I did the investigation. I found somebody. No,
Okay.
I did. That's why I'm so good at this job. I did it. No, I'm just kidding.
Amber, is that how you afford your such lavish lifestyle? No, kidding. Did you buy a pony with it?
Yeah. But what's really interesting is you just said how it's not just cash revenue. And just off the top of my head during our conversation, I can think of 12 different methods that I've come across just in the last few years of how they adapted and changed and used technology as their friend. And also what incorporates into that, as you said, the statistics now show us that 70% of dentists are going to have some form of embezzlement occur. And because there's so many different methods and technology is now becoming everyone's friend because it's changing and adapting, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it that a practice have things forensically looked at least one time in their ownership, whether it's the preventative side or an investigation? Like, how big of a priority should that be for dentists and dentist office out there?
What a lot of dentists have said to me, Amber, is losing money hurts. But what hurts even more is the betrayal that I feel because I chose to trust somebody and I probably shouldn't have. In other words, what they're saying is the emotional side of this is just as bad or worse. And we won't mention names, Amber, but we were talking the other day about one of your former clients who actually left dentistry after he was stolen from.
Yes.
Because He just didn't enjoy it anymore.
Yep.
And I hate to see stories like that. A really good friend of mine who's a dentist, and we've done 2 investigations for this person, is selling to a DSO. It's supposed to close in about 10 days. And this person's a good dentist. Their patients love them, but stolen from twice and just didn't want to do it again. So the best advice I can give anybody is the best money you can spend on this problem is in prevention. Absolutely. If you have been stolen from, we will investigate. We will help you prosecute. We will help you get money back. That was kind of what our company was founded on. But the direction we're heading in the long term is prevention. So work with Amber, get the systems in place, because that's a whole lot easier and cheaper, and you will lose less heart muscle than if you're stolen from and you have to pick up the pieces after.
Couldn't have said it better. And one of the things you mentioned is he's selling to the DSO, but I think we can all agree that criminals don't discriminate against individual practices or DSOs. All of them are fair game for criminals to go after for that. And whether you are a single practice, multi-location, private equity backed, it doesn't matter. It's all about opportunity, and preventive measures will be a lot less costly than reactive measures. That's for sure.
Yeah.
No question. And as I say, cost is just the beginning of the story. I just talked about 2 examples of people who made big life changes. In one case, selling to a DSO, and in the other, just hanging up the handpiece because
That's
of how
crazy.
embezzlement affected them. And that doesn't have to happen to you.
I was
Great.
reached out by an owner actually that I had worked on, and he says, I hate that I had to doubt my new employee because of what my old employee did. And so to that point.
Great. I think the story is wonderful, and I think it's so interesting how you started and how it's going to continue to grow and evolve. And the final thing I've always heard you say is embezzlement will never end, because you always think, oh, at some point nobody's going to need somebody to have this looked at. So what are your thoughts on that, Dave? The party's never going to end, right?
There was this ancient legal code called the Law Code of Hammurabi. That was the one that had the eye for the eye and the tooth for a tooth. And this was, I think, the Mesopotamians, but maybe the Phoenicians. I'm a little rusty on who it belonged to, but there's actually a provision in the Law Code of Hammurabi that talks about embezzlement. The ancient Egyptians who built the pyramids had embezzlement issues. This has been around forever. The first dental school in North America was the Baltimore Dental College, and that graduated its first graduates in 1850. The first reported embezzlement in dentistry in the United States happened in 1852.
Do you think he was going on the
Okay.
entire 2 year?
Possibly. And to be clear, there were dentists before that. Most of them for them, it was a side gig of their barber shop. But
I
yeah,
forgot about that. That dentists and barbers were the same. I forgot about that.
embezzlement has been with us basically since humans developed the concept of money. And I'm very confident in saying that it will still be with us 300 years from now. The form will change. The way people do it will change. But the fact that humans covet each other's possessions is never going to go away.
Absolutely. On that, thanks everybody for listening and joining us. We hope our conversation gave you a better understanding of who we are, what drives us, the great founder of this company, and why we're trying to constantly grow and help protect dental practices, and how much it's our passion. Every practice has a story, and every successful practice is built on trust and leadership and accountability. Our goal is to bring you education and strength and knowledge. If you have any questions, please reach out to us, because we're always here to help you understand the financial aspect of your practice and get to know us better. And Dave, do you want to add anything? You have anything you want to say to the audience at the end here?
I want to thank the audience, not just for being the audience, but for doing what they do. We are so privileged to be able to work with the dental profession. And I have met so many wonderful, caring, amazing dentists and team members. And I keep pinching myself that we get to work with this amazing group. So I want to thank people for that. And of course, I want to thank our team, and I love the people I work with. You're seeing two wonderful team members here with you today, but I think they would be the first two to say, we're not unique. We're part of something bigger. And I'm so privileged to work with that group. So I guess that's my closing thought. Thank you for welcoming us into your community.
Great. Yeah. Whether you're a new practice owner going to practice for a while, a large part of a DSO, or even team members, if you have questions how you can protect your practice, please feel free to go to our website, give us a call, reach out to us. We're always here to answer any questions.
Thanks for listening to the Prosperident Exchange. Until next time, stay informed, stay proactive, and protect what you've worked so hard to build.